Hello, welcome to another Gita video. Today we're looking at chapter 3 and verses 3 and 4. So, in these verses, in the last video you saw Arjuna expressing his confusion and his complaint about, well, why are you telling me still to do these horrible things? He wasn't convinced by what Krishna explained in chapter 2. In chapter 3, and in these verses, you're going to see that Krishna responds by talking about what are and what aren't viable paths to enlightenment. Okay, so here goes. The Blessed One said, "As I have already told you, my faultless friend, there are two paths to follow in this world. There's the yoga of awareness, followed by the spiritual philosophers, and the yoga of devotional acts, followed by the mystics. You cannot become free of karma by avoiding actions, nor can you gain success by mere renunciation." So here we are, 2 and 2, right? You have Krishna explaining two paths to follow in this world, right? The yoga of awareness and the yoga of devotional acts. And two things that you cannot become free or gain success from, avoiding action or renunciation. So what are these things? Well, the yoga of awareness, followed by spiritual philosophers, is what in the Hindu or Indian tradition is the path of Satchitanand, of truth, of consciousness, and of bliss. It's about meditation, right? It's the path of examining truth. It's the path of the contemplative mystic, right? What Krishna here called the spiritual philosopher. And then the yoga of devotional acts is the path of prem, the path of love, the path of surrender and devotion. It's the path of the heart. So one is the path of awareness, the other one's the path of the heart. And these are the paths that Krishna feels can be used to achieve enlightenment, to follow to the state of awareness. But you cannot become free of karma by avoiding actions. Now we should mention again what karma is in this class. Karma is cause and effect. It is the nature of reality. It's the nature of actions taken have reactions. That's it. It's not about some kind of weird, supernatural justice system or something like that. Right? It's a natural effect of the process of choices made over time. Right? And so he says you cannot become free of karma by avoiding actions, nor can you gain success by mere renunciation. Right? We have to remember here that Arjuna, his solution to his whole problem with his family conflict was that he was going to run away to the forest and become an ascetic. So he was going to avoid action and practice renunciation, right? The two things that Krishna says you can't do. And there's an awful lot of religion and spirituality and New Age spirituality and Buddhist spirituality and Hindu and Chinese and Western spirituality that essentially teaches those two things, avoiding action and renunciation. Right? It says, oh, well, if you just figure out a way to find your inner peace, right? If you can just stop doing things, if you can just be still and be quiet, and then that's it, that's all you need, right? Or if you can just give up those material interests that get in the way, right? That are unspiritual. If you can realize that you are not matter, you're an energy being of light from the Galactic Empire or something like that. No, Galactic Federation, sorry, because an empire would be too imperialistic, right? So those things have been endemic since Krishna's time in the nature of what is false religionists, right? False spirituality. It's talking about getting away from and avoiding the process of self-transformation. It's anti-initiatory, right? It says that if you could just be at peace, if you can just be still, if you can just give up your money, if you can just give up your attachment to things, if you can stop, if you can give up sex, right? If you can give up all these things. Ironically, in Hinduism, this has become as common as it ever was, and extra ironically, many of the followers of Krishna practice exactly those two things and not the other things, right? There's this emphasis on the taboo and what you want to avoid, right? And if you're and you will hear many people who tell you that Krishna doesn't want you to smoke or drink alcohol or do drugs or eat meat or have sex, right? And if you do those things, then obviously you are going to be punished, and if you avoid those things, then you will reach the state of spiritual purity and blah blah blah, right? But it's very important here that Krishna, like all true teachers, is not just saying this out of some kind of a personal preference. He's not saying it because it is a declaration from on high or something like that. It's not because God says so. It's not because there's some commandment written somewhere, and it's not because he's demanding this for him to then fix things for you or something like that, right? It's none of that stuff. He's saying this because it's true. He's saying this because he's saying these two things, the yoga of awareness and the yoga of devotion, these two things, they actually work. If you do them, if you work at them, they will actually work. These other two things, renunciation and non-action, if you try to do those things, they're not going to work. Like all true teachers, Krishna is fundamentally reality-based. He's pragmatic, and he's saying that there's a way to get enlightened, there's a way to not end up getting enlightened, right? That there's a way to do this spiritual path, and there's a way to fool yourself or to delude yourself or to distract yourself or to avoid having to do the things that you really have to do, the things you really don't want to do. Because of course, if some people who practice this idea of non-action say, oh yeah, well some people say non-action just use that as an excuse to sit on the couch and eat potato chips, but others will go to seminars and things like that, and they'll spend time sitting and trying to still the mind and to quiet the mind, and you need the quiet mind because then you can be quiet, right? And they'll do all that and say, oh yeah, this is really hard. And then, the rest of the time they'll go out and do whatever, right? Or people who renunciate will say, yeah, I really, I would really want to. I mean, if it wasn't for these rules that I've got to follow, I would love to get drunk and have sex and do all these other things, right? But in fact, this is a trick of, doing something that is sort of hard to avoid the things that are really hard, the things that require the real work, which is not just actual discipline at spiritual practices, but more importantly, and the most hard thing of all, is the willingness to change yourself. It means you have to be different than what you are now, and not just in that outer way of developing, of going vegetarian or something like that, right? Where now you're not eating meat, and so you think you're different. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about an inner transformation, a change of your fundamental, a shift in your fundamental context of your own being, from the persona to the individuality, right? From the inferior person to the superior individual. It's this, it means you have to give up everything you think you are, or you have to be willing to let go of the real things, not to say, oh well, I'm not attached because I'm letting go of watching TV or smoking pot or reading comic books or whatever it is that you think you're renouncing. That's not actual renunciation that will cause change in you, except in the most superficial way. It'll just mean you're lessening yourself by not doing certain things that you kind of enjoyed at one point, right? But that's a way to get out of, the harder work, which would be actually having to let go of your self-definitions, of your notions of of what you think you basically are. That's the hard work. That's the stuff that the yoga of awareness and the yoga of devotion, the reason they work to cause change in a person, to cause transformation, to cause the expansion of awareness, that they make you vaster, is because they oblige you to actually change, right? That they're actually effective at making you be less small. So that's it for today, and we'll continue this shortly. Thank you very much.